Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Idahoan Show. Today I've got a philosophical observation that I wanted to share with you about sort of an ironic quality of humility. But before I can explain the humility paradox, I need to clarify what exactly humility is. And in order to do that, I think I need to take even a step further back and explain what humility isn't. Specifically, humility is not self-esteem. Secular psychologists use the term self-esteem to refer to how you think about yourself, how good you think you are. And they've done studies that show that successful people tend to have a higher opinion of themselves than people who are less successful, so they tend to advise people to think highly of themselves so that they can be successful, which to me sounds like a textbook case of the fallacy that correlation does not imply causation. Of course, people who are successful think more highly than themselves of people who aren't successful, but that could very well be because they're successful rather than attributing their success to thinking highly of themselves. But that's all really beside the point. The point is that in psychology, they talk about self-esteem, and sometimes people will want to associate attitudes like pride and egotism with high self-esteem and humility with low self-esteem. Now, I guess in a secular psychology setting, if that's the way you want to define your terminology, then so be it. But in the context of Christian theology, that would be a non-standard and very confusing usage of the terms pride and humility. In theology, the sin of pride is basically the sin of selfishness, whether it's trying to elevate yourself above others, viewing yourself as more important than others, trying to better yourself at others' expense. All of those sinful attitudes and actions fall under the umbrella of the term pride. So if you have high self-esteem, if you think very highly of yourself, then at best, that puts you in a perilous situation of temptation with regards to the sin of pride, if you're not already indulging in it. But in the case of low self-esteem, if you're consumed with self-pity, that puts you in just as great of danger of falling into the sins of selfishness as high self-esteem does. For that matter, if you ostensibly have a low opinion of yourself, then presumably you've done some kind of self-evaluation, however intuitive or informal, and found yourself not to be meeting your own expectations, which implies that you actually have high expectations of yourself, perhaps higher than you can actually meet, which implies that you actually have an inflated opinion of yourself, which again is a form of pride. So if you've got high self-esteem, then either you're already caught up in pride or at least you're in grave danger of becoming caught up in it. And if you have low self-esteem, then you're already being consumed by a form of pride. So no matter where you fall on the scale of self-esteem from high to low, you're at best at risk of pride, which is the antithesis of humility. And so to explain humility in a way that it won't get confused with self-esteem or lack thereof, modern-day theologians will often say that humility obviously is not about thinking highly of yourself, but neither is it about thinking lowly of yourself. Instead, humility is about not thinking of yourself. Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification because clearly there is a type of self-evaluation that is compatible with humility, especially as it leads to repentance. But for the purpose of our discussion here, it's a good starting point for defining what humility is. Certainly, it would be fair to say that a humble person is not motivated by self-interest. Instead, they're motivated by love for God, love for others, zeal for their God-given calling, And so they're really not concerned about, receiving accolades of men or about their own reputation or really even about their own physical well-being, except to the extent that it enables them to fulfill their God-given purpose in life. But this implies that humility has the side effect of making a person impossible to intimidate. Because if they're not concerned about their own well-being, much less their own reputation, then there's really nothing you can threaten them with that would provide incentive to manipulate them. And this side effect leads to an interesting paradox, because every society has some form of political correctness. And in any given society, the keepers of their system of political correctness, whether they happen to be the ruling aristocracy or some kind of a priesthood or a government censor board or just, media barons and celebrities, they tend to view and portray anyone that they cannot easily control as being an arrogant fool. So there's the humility paradox for you. If you're genuinely humble, some people will invariably think you're arrogant. And if you're truly humble, then that won't bother you because you don't care what they think of you. I found this principle ironic enough that I thought it would be worth sharing with you all. So hopefully you found this as interesting as I did, and until next time, thank you for watching The Idahoan Show.